Hello, and welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. My name is Michael McKeever, and I will be your host tonight. Now, before we get started into the show, let me introduce you to our esteemed panel. Bill Hirschman is a theater critic and the founder of FloridaTheaterOnStage.com. Karen Stevens, an award-winning actress and writer. And our guest panelist for the night, Michelle Solomon, the editor of Miami Art Scene. Now, tonight we're switching things around. Our guest is, well, not only a real dear friend, but also a South Florida legend. You all know who she is because she's one of the panelists and the producer of this program. The one, the only, Miss Iris Acker. Iris, I'd love to welcome you to the show, but you're here all the time.
Well, that's how it goes. You're stuck.
So here's the thing. Television, stage, film, you've written books, you've done it all. How has the landscape, the South Florida culture landscape, changed in the many moons since you first started down here?
That's interesting. The thing is, if you ask me how the landscape had changed beginning with New York, I have a better answer because things were so different from then to now.
Well, you know what? Let's do that then. How's it changed since when you first started in New York?
Well, years ago, I started as a dancer. And dancers danced and singers sang. And actors acted. And if you were lucky, you got a line, maybe. But so the change there is you have to be able to do it all. You have to be able to sing, dance, and act to really make it today. And it's followed through, I think, with Florida as well. Maybe not as much. They'll, tolerate a singer who can move well and a dancer who can sing.
So you started as a dancer.
I was a tap dancer, yes.
I love it.
I was a chorus girl.
And then you evolved into an actress as well, and then...
It was a director of one of the shows that I was in New York said to me, they were giving lines out, which is they don't give out too often because they have to pay you extra. And he gave me a couple of lines, and he kept giving me more. I said, oh, yeah, good voice. He said, you really should study acting. I said, why? And he said, because he said, you're a good actress. I said, I am? And I was really quite surprised. But I mean, I always had the lead in all the school plays, but I always thought it's because I had the loudest voice. And I still do. And it never occurred to me that it was because I was a good actress. And then it, like you said, it evolved. It just evolved. And I didn't really start studying until after I had my equity card, because initially it was AGVA, the American Guild of Variety Artists, with all variety artists belong to, singers, dancers, etc.
What made you come down? What made you leave New York and come down to South Florida?
That's a good question. I got cast in New York, which always happens in New York. You go to an audition and they send you out of town. Well, this time I got sent to Fort Lauderdale to do the play The Marriage Go Round with Julie Newmar. And she did it on Broadway 20 years before she actually did it here in Florida at a theater that is now defunct. It was called the Stage Door Theater in Fort Lauderdale. It was on 17th Street. Very nice dinner theater. Dinner theaters were very in back then. And the play was done on Broadway with Claudette Colbert. That's the role I got. Julie Newmar did it and got the Tony for it when she was in her 20s. And Charles Boyer was the man. And anyhow, all the actors were brought in, and I got to do the play. And it was here for quite a while. And I loved it. And it was February. and that was just delightful. And while I was here, someone on the cast suggested, or backstage said, why don't you register with one of the agents? He said, you're going to be here a while. Maybe you can pick up a commercial or something. And I said, oh, okay. So I did. And everything she sent me on, I got. So I said, oh, in New York, what it is, you have to go on like 20 calls just to get a call back. I said, somebody's trying to tell me something. But I went back to New York and went to one of those 20 callbacks, 20 times to go back. And then I got cast again. It was just coincidence, again in Orlando. Another dinner theater. The play was Plaza Suite. And it was just a wonderful environment to be in Florida. Again, I don't know what month it was, but it was cold in New York, I remember that. And this time I did it with Alan North, his name was, and he was the understudy on Broadway for George C. Scott, who did it. And they wrote him in the film, as a matter of fact. Anyhow, it was wonderful at the time. Went back to New York, and I started on my husband. I said, I don't know what we're killing ourselves for here in New York. I can work in Florida. I could do commercials without having to go on 20 callbacks, 20 times for a callback. And so that really was the beginning. And when I was doing Plaza Suite, they were casting Minnie's Boys, and they couldn't find a Minnie. And somehow or other, they found me in Orlando. And in my Holiday Inn room, I auditioned for Minnie's Boys. The voice coach I was studying with insisted there were 2 shows I had to learn. One was Gypsy, and one was Minnie's Boys.
Who was doing Minnie's Boys
We should point out that Minnie's Boys is Minnie, the mother of Groucho Marx, not
the Marx Brothers.
Not Minnie Mouse. Okay.
We
just wanted to get that.
There were several of them.
Several. Who was doing it down here?
Bob Holtzman was the producer of it, Robert Holtzman, and he was affiliated with the Coconut Grove Playhouse. Anyway, yes, so I got the role, and I toured Florida, and I said, now this came back again. I said, Phil, what can I do to get you to come to Florida? It's so wonderful down there, and I loved it. And that's when he said, well, if I think about it, and you can help me get rid of my business, he said, there's one thing, you have to agree to live on a sailboat. I said, I'll live on a rowboat, anything you want. Just, yes. And that's kind of what happened.
And did you live on a sailboat?
I lived on a sailboat at the Dinakey Marina in Coconut Grove. It was a tremendous gamble. I left a 10-room house in Bayside, Queens, in New York, to come to Florida and live on a boat, and I loved it. The 10 happiest years of my life was when we owned that sailboat.
Wow.
And living aboard it. I didn't live aboard for 10 years, but I lived alone. I lived aboard for 3. And then we moved across the street to a condo.
And then,
but yes.
But then you worked at the Coconut Grove. You worked at the Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater. You worked virtually everywhere down here over that time.
Yes, yes, I was very lucky. I really was. Well, I lived Coconut Grove. I auditioned like everybody auditions. And the first time that I auditioned at Burt Reynolds, I think the show, oh, Norman, is that you? No, I didn't audition. I beg your pardon. The director at that time, Burt was the producer, was Rick Allen. And we had I don't know how we had a meeting at the Coconut Grove Playhouse. Equity came into Florida and said, there's a new theater opening up in Jupiter, Florida. Burt Reynolds is having a dinner theater there. So why don't you all send a resume? That was the one thing. That was also the time that I got elected Actors Equity Liaison, which is another story. But anyway, yes, that's why they came here. So I sent this resume, and I got a call, and it was from this director, Rick Allen. He said, are you available at such and such to do Norman, Is That You, with Lou Jacoby? And I said, oh, it sounds wonderful. When is the audition? He says, no. He said, let's meet. He says, I'll tell you, he said, come on up. He said, and to sign the contract. I said to my husband, you're coming with me. This is a scam, if there ever is one. So anyhow, as it was, I did meet with Mr. Rick Allen, and he said, we just cast you on your resume. I had done like every Neil Simon show already that had been written that he wrote. And so on my resume, on my picture, I actually got my first show at Burt Reynolds.
But that started a long relationship that you had with that theater. I know you did a lot of work there.
It was just wonderful.
Talk about Mr. Reynolds and the experience of working there.
Well, for me, it was such a treat because the atmosphere and the casting. Every show that I did had a star, in it, And it was just such a pleasure to work with whomever came in. I was usually the only Floridian, the only one from here working on the show. He would bring in all these stars. It's a wonderful experience. I'm thinking the only time that I auditioned actually was for the musical Grease. And after that, I just get a call. And they just say, we're doing a show Almost Perfect. Almost Perfect. Another one was...
But isn't it nice to just get a
Social
call?
Security. I should forget. I'm sorry, what did I forget?
Isn't it nice to just get a call?
Oh my! Oh, it doesn't happen very often, does it?
I think it
Karen?
happens when you get a reputation as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you built a reputation, and you know, I love talking to you because you always have such a wealth of stories and names. One of the best stories I've ever talked to you about is Jose Ferrer and the Tennessee Williams Night of the Iguana at Coconut Grove Playhouse. I mean, that was a very interesting time, and you always have wonderful names and people that you're just an encyclopedia of.
So tell that
Has to
story.
do
Tell that
with-
story,
okay.
yeah.
the Tennessee
I've
Williams
been
story.
around. I've been around a long time. I was very fortunate. I had opportunities. I was at the right time in the right place, and things like that. They are important. With the one in Key, that actually was an audition for Night of the Iguana, and the agent Peggy McKinley, who was at that time was with Act One, I think. Yes, and she said that the show is here and they're looking for a couple of Floridians to fill in at the Tennessee Williams Fine Arts Center. And so I auditioned for Night of the Iguana and I got the role. I played Miss Fellows. And I got down there. He didn't originally direct it, Tennessee Williams, but there was a problem with the director, so he just took over. And the kindest thing that ever happened to me is when he said, he was giving people notes, and very kindly, not in front, he took you aside. So you never knew what the other person, it's so kind, not to blare it out in front of everybody. And I said, Mr. Williams, I was the only one who, by the way, called him that. Mr. Williams, he said, yes, I was. I said, you have any notes for me? He said, no. He said, you're just perfect. Oh my God. Oh, I want you to record it. So yeah, some nice things have happened to me.
You've
And I
done
say-
so many things. I mean, you know, you've done television and film and commercials and writing books. We'll talk about your books. You've kind of done it all. Is there
Well,
one thing that?
I was very lucky as a commercial actress in New York and down here exceptionally. So again, Act One, Peggy McKinley said to me one day, you're picking up everything. I have all these wonderful people. She said, I would love if you would give a class for my talent and help them. I said, one class is not going to help. I said, first of all, I've never taught. I haven't the vaguest idea. He said, she's the one who said, well, just tell them what you do. And I had really made a fool of myself in New York when I first started out doing auditions because I listened very carefully to what they said. And they would say, just be yourself. Well, I was heavy into theater at that time. I had just done Murder in the Cathedral and things like that. And so I be myself, and I took it literally. I wasted a year of my life until finally I got to this one agency, and the casting director said to me, who are you, Lady Macbeth? She said, I forgot the product now. I think it was a girdle. Anyway, I really forgot about it. And she said to me, people don't talk like that. And she said to me, put some hot potatoes in your mouth or something. And I cried all the way home on the subway. I'll never think. Then I watched TV. I said, I can do it. They're acting. They're acting. They're acting. They're not being themselves. And as soon as I got that, and I became the character they wanted, which at that time was the lady next door, as we say. And I immediately got a mop commercial. It's true, I did. I got a before and an after on it. And as soon as I learned the secret, you couldn't stop me. So when I came here, Peggy said to me, so all I did at that time was share. I said, the important thing is they don't want to really know. Oh, another thing they say to you, Karen, I'm sure you're used to this too. She says, well, tell me a little about yourself. And they say, well, I just did a Charlie's Angels, and then I had this wonderful commercial I did for Silver Cup bread. That goes back a long way. And they don't care. They really don't. So I learned.
Why do they ask?
Why do they ask? Yeah. They want to see your personality. Oh, okay. And I would say, hi, I'm Iris Acker, and I have spent every penny I've made in this wonderful world of show business on a beautiful 37-foot Morgan Out Island sloop. Anyone here want a crew? That was my spiel. I had it down. And you live on a sailboat? Mm-hmm. Oh, I was so interesting. Really? Do you sail? I said, well, of course, that's the whole. Where do you go? We go to the Bahamas, we go to the. That is.
You're selling the personality, you're not selling the product.
That's what it was.
That's the key.
And so I taught talent, make up a little spiel, tell something interesting about it. I bet you all have hobbies. Maybe you do the sweepstakes, or you do whatever it is. You're a gambler. It doesn't matter. And that was number. And then so anyhow, that's what I was doing. And as a result of that, Peggy again said, "You really ought to start teaching." And Laurie Wyman was working for Peggy McKinley at that time. Laurie Wyman, the casting director, and she was helping Peggy in some fashion. And she was the first one to take my class. And she said, may I? I said, of course. So I taught here for 10 years.
Wow.
10 years. And as a result of the teaching and my students telling me, but don't you have a book, something we can remember and follow? So I said, well, I'm not a writer. And I don't know who said it, probably my husband said, well, honey, you sure can talk. So talk it in. So that's what I did. I talked this book into a cassette player. Remember those things? And I literally had somebody type it up, and I edited it. And
the rest?
No, The Secret. This is that one. Yeah. So the book, The Secrets to Auditioning for Commercials. It's been upgraded several times, and there's a DVD.
The Secrets to Auditioning. If say I want to get a copy of this, how would I go about getting it?
Well, the best way is through Samuel French in California, or the Drama Bookshop in New York. I think Amazon has it too.
Great.
Yeah. So
your other book, though, show that one too, is
well.
What got you where you are today, which is a whole nother piece of your life, which is interviewing people.
Television.
This gig and doing interviews with famous people. How did that come about?
Well, I was a very political person. I always was. You heard me talk about Actors Equity. I became the Actors Equity liaison. In New York, I was on the board of directors of the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. So when I came down here, the first thing I did was run for the board. I got on. And as soon as I could, I ran for president, and I became president. I got this call from WLRN saying they'd like to start a program in the arts. Performing arts. Would I come down and talk to them about it as president? I said, sure. So I would have the whole list of men that could be possible hosts. And when I got there, they said, no, we want you. I said, why me? I've never hosted a show before. I wouldn't know what to do. And they said, well, you are the president of AFTRA, which had nothing to do with, it made no sense at all. What has one thing got to do with it? And I said, they said, well, all these famous people. They thought because I was the president of AFTRA, I knew every celebrity that ever walked in Florida. And they said, we'll call it on-the-job training. I said, oh, all right, talk to people. And so somehow or other, I did local talent. I started out with very local talent. And then Charlie Cinnamon, who was the guru of public relations directors, found the show, which on stage with Iris Acker, of course, evolved into what it is today. And he started getting me celebrities. And I had everybody who came to Florida was on the show. And I always asked them, so what got you where you are today? I'm a very curious person. And I think that's what did it. I asked questions that I thought my audience, but as well, I really wanted the answers to. So, what got you where you are today?
So
That evolved into the book.
There you go. Here's a question. I've been watching you for 20 years doing this, and you're so good at it. You make it look so easy, and we've all learned that it's not the easiest thing in the world. But when you first started, was it a challenge? Did you find it difficult, or was it something that you just slid into?
I just did it. I just did it because I like talking to people, and it was a gamble. You know, I had no idea what was going to evolve. I really didn't. But that question is what I came up with, and that was it. And then they would tell me, and as a result of what they said, I would have, I never had notes. I mean, I know about them, or, of course, a bio, but I just said, as a result of what they said, I said, oh, how do you do that? Do you recommend that for somebody starting out today? And, the questions just came as a result. Well, who else did you work with? And how were they to work with? Would you share that with? It's so easy. Anything I would ask them if we were sitting and having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee. And so for me, it was easy.
Well, did you find, when you're talking, obviously there are 50 different kinds of people who become celebrities, but did you find a through line, a commonality underneath all of these people? Not all of them, but most of them share certain qualities?
Yeah, talent. I really, talent and passion.
And passion.
Talent and passion. Talent, like, I've got to do this. This is something I have to do. I just have to do it.
Are there any favorites that really stand out to you of the people you've interviewed, or the celebrities?
Well, I always talk about Phyllis Diller because this was done on location. They brought me into Disney. She was the queen for the day. They do these parades or something. And I asked her that question. But what got you? How did it all start?
Well, it started with, poverty.
Poverty, that's a good way to start.
Yeah, it's a motivator.
And I expected her to be very funny, I really did. And I said, so Phyllis, what got you where you are today? And she said, poverty. And that, I said, poverty? You mean no money? Did you get a job? I couldn't.
As opposed to.
And it was the most serious interview I've ever done. She was never funny. She just told wonderful stories about, she had all these children, like 5 of them, I think, and a husband who walked out. That was Fang. She used to talk about it as if he had. And so that, I say, was my favorite interview because it was such a shocker. And I've had some bad ones too, but I won't say who they are.
But you've also worked with a lot of people who we will call big name people, or people who are well-known actors and actresses. Can you tell us some of those?
Well, I got the reputation of being able to work with the most difficult of actors, and a lot of them are. And so, yes, I was cast. Julie Newmar, who we wound up being friends, we still exchange Christmas cards. But I'm just saying, she wasn't difficult. She wasn't one that was. But there was a lot of them. I mean, I shouldn't say that, though, who they were. But yes, I supported a lot of stars. I was going to write a book saying, stars I have supported, or how'd they ever stand up without me? Because that's really what it was. I was used to feed them lines when they'd go up and that kind of thing. But
without saying who was hard to work with or who wasn't, who were some of the ones that you did work with? We won't.
Well, I like to talk about Jose Ferrer because he directed me and became a friend, and I just loved being there with him and hearing his stories. I mean, story after story. And that's how he directs. That reminds me of it. And yes, what story is that? Jose, who did you work with? And but who did I enjoy working with? You're saying?
No, just names of who you work with. We don't have to know whether it was a good experience or bad
experience.
I
see.
Just tell us some of the names.
Drop some names.
Name dropping.
Bells are ringing is the show. Okay. So at Burt Reynolds, I worked with Richard Klein. Is that his name? Sure. And Lisa Mordenti. That's Cheetah Rivera's daughter. And I worked with people that you may remember: Virginia Graham, Jackie Mason, a lot of television personalities.
Hal Linden.
And Hal Linden, yes, I work with Hal. I go back a long way with Hal Linden. You have a copy of my resume?
Well, there's a lot of names,
Victor
so
Bono.
it's
Do you know who
understandable.
Victor Bono was?
Of
Yes.
course.
Oh, he was so wonderful. I worked with him. I did a play called A Visit to a Small Planet. I would have a wonderful story about that, but we only have a few minutes left. I know I can't help it.
Iris, I wanted
So
to
I
ask
won't
you,
go-
you've really become a supporter of local arts, and I just wanted to make sure we talked about that.
supporter of the arts.
A supporter of the arts here. I mean, the show, you have local talent. That seems like that's really a very important thing to you and continuing.
Wasn't I
this.
lucky? Wasn't I lucky? Really, that's what this was. I just, like fell into it. It's like it's a niche. It's going to be 30 years.
Oh my God.
30 years.
30 years. And I had no idea that that's what I was meant to do.
So here's my question for you as we sign off here. What's next for you? Just more of the same?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you
More of
that
the same.
the beauty and simplicity of that answer says a lot because you do such great things for us already. Not only is it have you graced our stages and taught us with your insight and been on countless commercials, but you've been a huge inspiration for all of us here in South Florida who've had the great honor to watch you on stage for 30 years. It's been a pleasure, it really is. And it's been a pleasure to actually have you in this seat as opposed to on this
And
side.
I was very young when I started.
You were a baby, we know
started
that.
this show.
Thank you for bringing us on board.
Yes, thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Iris, so much. Thank you to this incredible panel that we've had. And thank you for joining us tonight. This has been a very special show, and it's been wonderful having you with us. As we always say, support the arts, support theater, go see a show. If you want to find out where they're playing, all you have to do is go to floridatheateronstage.com and make sure you join us next week right here on Spotlight on the Arts. Thanks. Bye now.